slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's time for Headliners. I'm Mark Dolan and I am in possession of tomorrow's front pages. Reacting to the big stories from tomorrow's papers are Steve N. Allen and Nick Dixon. That's right, we've brought out the big guns. Well, Steve N. Allen. So here are the headlines. See you shortly.
Thanks, Mark. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson has told the G7 the world must go further and faster to support Ukraine. That's as Moscow's war in the country continues. The Prime Minister met with world leaders and Ukraine's president virtually, agreeing to intensify economic pressure on Vladimir Putin in any way possible. The group vowed to further isolate Russia's economy and campaign against Kremlin elites who support their president. The meeting comes as Russian attacks are intensified on the Azovstal steel plant in the besieged city of Mariupol. The plant is the only area in the city not controlled by Russian forces. 300 civilians who'd been trapped in the steelworks for 2 months had been rescued, and Ukrainian fighters who stayed behind have vowed to continue their defence as long as they're alive. But from the plant, the deputy commander of the regiment pleaded with world leaders and the UN to help urgently.
We're under heavy shelling by naval forces, by tanks, under artillery shelling by multiple rocket launchers. We're ordinary boys holding rifles and rocket-propelled grenade launchers. These are soldiers who carried out and keep carrying out their duties. They need to be evacuated.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says around 60 people who'd been sheltering in a school in the Luhansk region have been killed by Russian bombs. Earlier, the governor of Luhansk estimated 90 people were hiding in the school. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has condemned Russia's attack and said the deliberate targeting of civilians is a war crime. Back here in the UK, the Deputy Prime Minister has vowed to reform the Northern Ireland Protocol to improve stability in Northern Ireland following Sinn Féin's success in the Stormont elections. The party won 27 seats, overtaking the DUP, which dropped to 25. The region has been without power-sharing executive for several months after the DUP refused to be involved in protest over the post-Brexit agreement. Schools in England will be required to publish an attendance policy under new government plans. There'll also be compulsory registers for children who aren't in classrooms, so authorities can identify children missing out on full-time education. The Prime Minister has said the new legislation and reforming school funding will create a system that works for every child. Further details will be set out in the Queen's speech on Tuesday. And actor Dennis Waterman has died aged 74. He was best known for his starring role as bodyguard Terry McCann in Minder, and he first found fame as a policeman in The Sweeney. He became well known for singing the theme tunes to many of his own shows. His family says he passed away peacefully in hospital in Spain with his wife by his side. This is GB News on TV, online and DAB+ radio. Now it's back to headliners.
Many thanks to Bethany Elsey. Welcome to Headliners, the show where three funny people attempt the seemingly impossible, draw humour from the day's headline stories. I'm Mark Dolan, and the first of our comedy alchemists is Steve N. Allen. And joining in the wizardry, well, he's got a strange hat, Nick Dixon. And let's have a look, gentlemen, at tomorrow's front pages. And we'll start with the Daily Mail. Now, this is a story that appears on several papers. Rattled Starmer snubs the chance to clear the air. After leaked memo sinks his story and Labour insiders say he'll be axed if fined, Sir Keir pulls out of press grilling today. Keir Starmer was running scared last night as the Beergate scandal plunged his leadership into crisis. We'll get reaction from my brilliant guests on that in just one moment. Let's go to the Daily Telegraph next, shall we? And their headline, Putin is mirroring the Nazis, says the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace. Hay fever tablets run low as pollen peaks. And Govan Sunak meddling to stop Truss protocol plan. The Independent next, Ukraine refugees forced to live in unvetted homes, another story we'll be covering. And Nkuti Gatwa is the new Doctor Who. Handsome chap, very talented actor. He is the new Time Lord. The Guardian next, more than 2 million Britons can't afford to eat every day, and 60 feared dead in an air raid on a Ukraine school. A devastating school story, horrific headline. Next up, shall we go to the FT? And US hits Gazprom bank bosses as fresh sanctions focus on services. The Daily Mirror. Minder legend Dennis dies at the age of 74. Tributes to star Waterman. Of course, he was massive in the 70s. As one half of a cop duo in The Sweeney. Minder and New Tricks. He did it almost every decade. Families' new energy shock is the other headline in the Mirror. Direct debit bills hell. Direct debit payments have at least doubled for 1 in 4 energy users. This according to Martin Lewis, the money-saving expert. The Times next. Bonfire of EU laws in bid to boost the economy. Johnson plans revival with post-Brexit reboot. And Putin must suffer same fate as Nazis, says Ben Wallace. And finally, the Daily Star tributes as Minder star Dennis Waterman dies. Also, it's time to slap on that sunscreen, folks. Sun cream. Hottest summer ever. 27 degrees on the way, and we will be warmer than Italy. 4 more record-breaking heat waves to come this year. Well, that's good news, isn't it? Let's end on a positive note. Those are your front pages. Monday's Guardian are reporting on issues with the Ukrainian refugee housing programme. Steve.
Yeah, this is not looking good. So the government's scrambling to rehouse hundreds of Ukrainians who've been granted visas because this is under the Homes for Ukraine scheme. I know there's 2 schemes they've got going on.
Yeah.
But the people who should be housing them have now been deemed unsuitable. There's some refugee charities warned about this. Part of it is because the way in which the matches start to happen via social media and Facebook. Why? Why was that the step one? If you want something dodgy to happen, do it online. Seems like the weird thing. I don't even buy stuff from Facebook Marketplace because I'm a little bit worried. So the idea that you have a scheme that should be helping those who are vulnerable, and it turns out some weirdos got involved because it's online. I'm not sure if we should be able to pull a surprise face. But the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, don't even care what the acronym is, it's a long title, that one, is it? Says that no visas should be issued until the Home Office has completed checks on every adult in the house. But clearly that's not happened because some have come up as unsuitable. If you want someone to do a thorough background check from someone who's on Facebook, ask a woman in her 30s best friend. Because if ever you start dating one, wow, that CBS check that happens and that group of friends gets to the bottom of everything.
It's true. They do their due diligence at that point.
Certainly do. So, look, more should have been done. That's by the looks of it. More checks should have been done. There's another part of this story as well, which I found interesting, that refugees could be placed in university accommodation, but that's not been sorted out. But also it would mean they're the first bunch of people to leave university without being in massive debt. Could be an interesting sign.
Yeah, what an interesting new experiment. Well, look, a concerning story. Let's move on now to Monday's Times and more fallout, Nick, from the Sinn Féin election result in Northern Ireland.
Yes, Irish politics and tensions are really a welcome combo, but the headline is Sinn Féin win in Northern Ireland reignites Brexit tensions. We talked about it last night. I'm becoming some sort of Irish political expert, which I didn't really wish to be, but I'll go through it briefly. Essentially, the DUP are sort of threatening to refuse to even join the executive unless the protocol is dealt with. Meanwhile, our old friends at the EU say they won't renegotiate it. So there was talk a while back, Liz Truss was talking to Šefčovič, the Vice President of the European Commission, but he's now saying that the EU would never have a mandate to renegotiate the protocol or go beyond existing proposals. So now the UK government is going to have to bring forward primary legislation to unilaterally switch off key parts of the protocol. So that's basically, it's a sort of standoff. DUP is saying, we're not doing anything until you sort that protocol. EU is saying, well, we're not sorting it. So the government's going to have to somehow sort it themselves. And I've just been very objective because I don't take a strong view on Irish politics because I get enough hate mail already.
Yeah, of course. It's an existential issue for the people of Northern Ireland. That's the point. You've got a divided community, a majority at this point who want to be part of the United Kingdom, but the tectonic plates, Steve, seem to be shifting.
Indeed, and they're shifting in a way which the system isn't keeping up with. With such a large vote going for this concept of an alliance, some people were clearly, because we're all getting old now, there are loads of people who can vote who were born after the agreements were made. So they don't really have that same passion between this two tribal way of doing things, but the power sharing doesn't take that into consideration. So it feels like there needs to be some sort of a way of changing to adapt to this third party in there. I mean, it will never happen. We can't even manage to get a third party working in politics when there's not that historic issues either.
It's true.
But it's interesting. Brexit's back. I mean, even if you like the idea of Brexit, are we now willing to have that conversation where we say people who said this wouldn't cause a problem with Northern Ireland before a referendum might not have been getting the nail on the head? You know what I mean? Some people saw this coming, and even if you think Brexit is worth it, this doesn't have to be a Remainer point of view. This is an issue that some people saw coming, so why wasn't more done to prepare for it?
Well, as with friction in relation to the transport of goods, as with the Northern Ireland Protocol, it will actually hurt the EU too, and they don't want to be seen to restart the Troubles. So, yes, I guess this is to do with Brexit, and you're right to point that out. We've got to sort of accept the positives and the negatives of Brexit, warts and all, but we are where we are. And it's not just our problem, it is a problem for Brussels as well. And I think that there needs to be strong diplomatic pressure on both sides to fix this. Because I don't think that the EU need to so overzealously police that invisible border.
Yeah, and there was loads of talk before about European leaders wanting Britain to be seen to fail. It wasn't just enough to have a peaceful Brexit. I think that's changing, other than possibly Macron. Yeah. But other than that, the idea of we need to be punished for it, that's over.
I think a lot of the politics of it are beginning to wash away, aren't they? Yeah.
Which is the only time when we can get solutions. So maybe, are we being hopeful? They'll have to edit that out. Are you sure?
What have they put in your tea? Nick Dixon.
Hello.
We interrupted you, which I consider a crime of both broadcasting and comedy.
You didn't really. I think Steve covered it pretty well. It's
Can you do better? I think you can do better.
Oh, of course. The EU, they didn't exactly make it easy about the protocol, so there is that. If you want to get all Romanian about it, and it's also worth noting there was a poll from January that showed that 78% in Northern Ireland say that this protocol does need to change. So hopefully it will happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's a political headache for the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, but an opportunity if he gets this right, Nick.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you've covered it, Mark. I think you're coming to me as if I need to say loads more on this story. I've still got more.
Can we go back to
the monkey flu story from last night? I knew you were going to do it.
Yeah, that's right. Yesterday we talked about, very sadly, there's a new monkey virus out, which is giving people strange bumps on their hands.
Worried.
Nick's basically got about 5 minutes of stand-up material based on it, haven't you?
How many symptoms have you got by now?
The problem is Mark moved on last night without asking me about it, but all I was going to say was it was like the movie Outbreak with the monkeys. That was what you missed.
Worth waiting for, by the way. Interrupt Nick Dixon at your peril. Speaking of fallout, this one from Monday's Mail is a tragic tale of the consequences of shutting down society, Steve.
Yeah, it is. An 80-year-old woman lost sight in one eye because the pandemic meant cancellations of hospital eye appointments that she was meant to have. If she would have had them, she believes, and if you read the story, it's easy to believe, that she would have possibly continued to have both eyes working. 80-year-old Jeanette Harris. She attended 3 appointments before the lockdown. And then she says, I do blame the health board because they should have carried on with the appointments. And she does so much better than all of the arguments that spring out of this. She nails it. She blames the right people. Because it doesn't actually matter whether there should have been a tiny lockdown, huge lockdown, no lockdown. What should have always happened, regardless of the level of lockdown, is that people should have had the care that they needed, in the same way that we had a lockdown and we all didn't starve to death, because we need food and we made provision for us to get
Correct.
food. They should have put in provision. Now, to be fair, even I had an operation during lockdown. I had a lump removed from my tongue. This thing grew, and I could get that sorted.
And a tummy tuck.
Hey, and these. But I managed to get that sorted out over the phone. You can't check the back of an eye with a camera on a phone these days, so more should have been done. Can I also just throw in how bad this was? A letter from the consultant in February said, I'm sorry to see that you've lost the vision in the right eye, but equally pleased that your left eye continues to do well. Firstly, don't start with, I'm sorry to see. That's a slap in the face.
Correct.
And then the rest of it is just, it's like the old joke about the good news and bad news. We've had to amputate your legs, but the guy in the next bed wants to buy your shoes. But they're an actual consultant sending that out.
Yeah, it's a clumsily worded, to say the least.
Oh, yes.
Well,
go, Nick.
Well, no, I'm making it easy for you now, Mark, by just cutting in. But all I was going to add was that the story says after the pandemic forced cancellation of hospital appointments, but of course, it was lockdowns. The article, by my calculation, doesn't mention lockdowns once. So there's this thing where you pass it on to the pandemic rather than saying lockdowns. That's what bothers me.
Yeah. I mean, the issue we had during the pandemic, and clearly it was an unknown quantity in January 2020. I don't think COVID had a name in late 2019. That's how much of an abstract concept it was. It reached our shores, an early attempt to stop its spread. Now, we can debate till the cows come home whether a virus like COVID can be stopped. But certainly what happened, Steve, is there was an attempt to insulate the NHS from the virus. And I think that's an aspect of lockdown that hasn't been reflected on in any great detail. The fact is that by focusing on COVID, trying to make the NHS COVID secure, which we can all understand why, because people in hospitals are by definition vulnerable. But I just wonder whether that's something that will also need to be looked at for the COVID inquiry, is an attempt to make hospitals and medical settings COVID-free.
Yeah, I mean, there's one very easy way to make sure that they're COVID-free. Shut them down. So just to give you the spectrum of the ridiculousness of the logic.
Exactly.
One end would be that. So
and we did see GP surgeries literally bolted shut, didn't we?
Yeah, and I know we have the online version, and I got an operation during it, so that's in the balance.
Including a bum lift.
I mean, it's amazing. 2 floors it stops at, but you don't want to know where the basement is. But the point is, you're right. There were so many unknowns, but I tell you what was known: people need medical treatment, and so we should have continued to find a way to do that.
Back to your lift. I'll take the service entrance.
Ooh.
Moving on now. We start with Sir Keir Starmer and the Beergate fallout. Keir Starmer and Beergate, what's going on? I don't know anything about this.
Is it me with the Beergate one?
Yeah.
Go on then.
Oh, brilliant.
Enlighten me. I've been living under a rock for the last week.
Well,
who is Keir Starmer?
He's a heavy drinker. No, he's not. Shadow Levelling Up Secretary. Don't you feel sorry for someone having that title? Lisa Nandy refused to rule out a leadership bid should there be more problems with Beergate. This is following this Beergate memo. First point, refuse to rule out is lazy journalism, is it? She's not saying it, but she's not saying it, and they get a story out of that. But previously, the excuse that Keir had was about it wasn't a party, it was a break during a working day to have some food. And now there's a memo that shows it was pre-planned. What? Someone pre-planned the concept of a break in a working day? Someone managed to calculate that humans need food? What is this, Machiavelli? So I'm not sure if that is the smoking gun that some newspapers are making out. I am really enjoying the way in which people have flip-flopped. They've spent months going, it's just because there's a birthday cake doesn't make it a party. If that's true, then Asda's cake aisle must be where it's all happening. And then all of a sudden, the worst thing they could ever imagine is someone had beer. Oh, the debauchery of it. I don't know whether any of this is worthwhile.
But wasn't it Starmer's attacks on Boris Johnson in relation to the rules that makes this a sort of hot political story?
It does, and it does mean he too could be a hypocrite. And I tell you what else is hypocrisy? Making a rule and breaking it. So there's
for sure.
plenty of hypocrisy.
I suspect, I think it seems pretty clear that any transgression wouldn't be on the scale of what happened at number 10.
Yeah.
And I'm on record as saying that it was hypocritical and it was a disgrace for those that followed the rules, and our leaders did not. However, the issue you've got is that the Labour Party denied that Angela Rayner was at this event for months, and it turns out, whoops, she was.
Difficult to miss.
Then Keir Starmer argued that he stopped food but then went back to work, except that this food was served before 10 p.m, and it's not clear that you would carry on working late into the night, particularly as this gathering seemed to be a sort of fundraising...
He's a late-night crazy worker.
Maybe that's what it is. The bottom line, the problem for him is that even if he's not in the wrong, we're asking these questions.
Yeah. And, look, the big question that everyone gets asked, should he have to step down if he lied? Well, maybe, but maybe Boris has to. Maybe do a pact with Boris. We'll go on 3. And if ever there's someone you wouldn't trust to actually go on 3, it's Boris Johnson.
I'm assuming you would, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like Keir Starmer to be Prime Minister?
Do you know, not necessarily, but I also don't think that these two things are equivalent.
Yeah.
But they're being made out to be. Now there's a police investigation, there'll be a time when we can pretend that they are.
I'm not sure that he should go for this, because I've said that Beergate was a soap opera in its own right. So sorry, Partygate.
Yeah.
Get my gates mixed up. And I don't think necessarily he should go. Are there wider concerns, though, about his judgment? So, for example, in relation to Partygate, he basically leveraged that for all the politics he could get out of it, at the expense maybe of the cost of living crisis. This is a leader of the Labour Party that was seen to reverse or want to reverse the Brexit decision. He campaigned for Jeremy Corbyn to become Prime Minister. Has he got too much baggage, Keir Starmer?
On that, I will absolutely hug you. I would rather he spends less time talking about the variety of gates, styles, whatever crossing you've got, and get stuck into cost of living stuff. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, by the way, does he survive this, Keir Starmer?
Do you know, I actually don't know, because what a difficult situation. If he gets fined, he's very much laid out his cards on what he thinks should happen to a person fined. And it would put pressure on Boris, wouldn't it, if Keir was like, all right, bye, your move. But I think we know what his move would be.
Steve, you're on TV. You say you don't know. Make something up.
OK, I'm very sure that he will, about 3.5 weeks until it happens.
And there's our soundbite. We'll have you back. Nick Dixon.
Yeah, you missed the best bit, which is that she called him Mr. Rules. Lisa Nandy referred to him. She said he's Mr. Rules. He does not break the rules. I don't know if that was a memo that went out or if it was just a spontaneous thing from her, but do you really want Mr. Rules to be PM? I mean, it makes Boris seem even cooler, doesn't it? Imagine going for a job interview, like, what's the boss's name? Oh, it's Mr. Rules. Would you actually want to work there, Mark?
Not really. Or a teacher called Mr. Rules would be much fun.
Well, that was Steve's nickname at school.
Oh, I'm sure it was. No, that...
all the good rules. Well, ideal gas equation rule, PV equals nRT. Oh, it's one of the best rules.
Look at that. I tell you something. I've never been heckled with an equation before, but there's a first time for everything. Let's go to Monday's Telegraph now. And EasyJet have come up with drastic measures to deal with staffing levels, Nick.
Yep, EasyJet removes passenger seats to cope with staffing crisis. Not like them to come up with a cheap solution, but they've found a way to reduce the number of seats from 156 to 150, so they can reduce cabin crew from 4 to 3. This is because of a rule where you must have one cabin crew member for every 50 seats. I'm surprised they didn't just ask passengers to stand and get rid of a few of their seats. But anyway, of course, they've had a lot of trouble because they were hit by the pandemic, or if you prefer, lockdowns, which obviously devastated the industry. So, yes, they're having to strip back seats, and other people have tried other things. British Airways have begun offering a £1,000 welcome bonus to lure cabin crew back. So, yeah, it's a bit of a crisis in the industry, and that's EasyJet's solution.
Are you a fan of the low-cost airlines? I mean, that should be an absolute back-of-the-net opportunity for any comedian. What do you think of low-cost airlines?
Oh, yeah, and then you could do the set on, What's the deal with the way they all applaud when you land? That kind of...
I'm a huge fan. I prefer them to the posh airlines. I think
they're cheaper?
Well, they're definitely cheaper, but I think there's an honesty about Ryanair and EasyJet. I think they rolled their sleeves up. I think they try a bit harder.
But do you still travel? You probably do, Mark. I gave up on the idea of travel when I wasn't necessarily prepared to take what some people call the dodgy death jab. I would never use that term, but I didn't want. Some people didn't want to take the jab, let's say, and then it looked like we were never going to be able to travel again at one point. So I just gave up in my heart the idea of ever leaving the country. Luckily, we're in the best country already, England, not Britain. So what do you think, Mark?
Yeah, for a while it was more easy jab than EasyJet, wasn't it? Now, Nick, what's the longest you've ever waited to apologise? Is it in the same ballpark as this story in The Guardian?
Never complain, never explain, Mark. So I never apologise. But this is, well, actually, I mean, now I'm making jokes, but it's a very serious story. This is apology 8 years on for laws that expelled Jews from England. So the Church of England is apologising for its shameful actions, which is a thing it likes doing now. And this is the Synod of Oxford, who 800 years ago passed laws forbidding social interactions between Jews and Christians, forcing Jews to wear identifying badges, never a great idea, imposing church ties on them and banning them from certain professions. And, of course, the Church of England was not created till the 1530s, but that's not usually a reason for the Church of England to stop apologising for stuff. So it's at once, obviously it's a horrific thing historically, but then some people are pointing out, to the Church of England, they weren't really responsible. Do they really need to go around apologising? But that's what they like doing now, instead of doing Christian
Would
stuff.
you, Steve, like to apologise for anything?
Oh, yes, but, I mean, not this.
No. Where do we
around
start?
800 years ago. Yeah, I've got enough in my lifetime to apologise for. Look, I mean, this is... some people might say the apology is unnecessary, but then again, it's costless. So why not? Would be.
But is costless worthless?
I mean, to be honest, I'm not...
Sounds similar. Kind of rhymes.
Yeah, I'm not the religious type, so most of this story I do think, oh, religion makes people do bad things back in the olden days. Again, can't pull the shocked face too much.
Yeah, exactly. Plot spoiler. Well, look, a fascinating start to the programme. We've got so much more. After the break, we're going to talk about Doctor Who, the late, great Dennis Waterman, and one of the most lucrative swapsies of all time. See you shortly.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates and strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
I'm Mark Dolan. Welcome back to Headliners, a first look at tomorrow's papers. Joining me are two comedians plucked from diverse parts of the country. Nottinghamshire's finest, Steve N. Allen, and a man from Cumbria, Nick Dixon. Now, let's go to Monday's Express and the passing of a great, Steve.
Yeah, Dennis Waterman died at the age of 74. I think the great thing about his career, I can tell how old you are by which TV show you know him from.
Yes.
My generation, Minder, maybe those slightly older, Sweeney. If you know him from New Tricks, you're too young, go to bed, it's a school night. If you know him from On the Up, well done.
Thank you.
Very good sitcom. Yeah.
Did On the Up feature Joan Sims, the Carry On legend?
Mrs. Wembley. Just the one, Mrs. Wembley?
Just the one, Mrs. Wembley.
Yeah. Yeah.
He had a great career. What he did is that he made the souffle rise several times in his career, didn't he?
Yeah.
Because you would have thought, right, nailed it with a Sweeney, an icon of 70s TV. Then he comes back and he does it in the 80s with Minder. And then he does it in the noughties with New Tricks. I was like, this guy was perennially successful.
Yeah. And then there was that second kind of bump to the career of, if you know him from Little Britain, I'd just keep that to yourself for a few days out of respect. But there is a part of the story, look, I keep bringing it up that I've obviously lost relatives recently. I was sat by my dad when he passed away. His wife was by his side. So that is a cherishable thought. Yeah. The fact that he died in such a nice way. He said he passed away very peacefully at home in Spain. His wife was by his side. So, of course, it's sad. But it's almost it's a thing to aim for, to have that level of success followed by a peaceful death.
100%, that's exactly right. And look, it's not easy to sustain a career in this industry, but he was somehow a hardy perennial of British TV, wasn't he?
I love the way you look at me when you say it's not easy to sustain a career in this industry.
Well, I mean, I think this is the big moment for you.
This is my moment, to quote Martin McCutcheon. Yeah, I love Dennis Waterman, and I am the On the Up era. That's what I know him from. Obviously, Sweeney and Mind are great as well. I loved On the Up. It had an impact. It's one of those things you watch when you're very young, in my case, and I loved it. And he sings the theme tunes. That's a great thing. He sang a lot of his own theme tune. I was so young when he says, "I'm the Lord and Master of all I purvey." I thought he was saying all Upper Bay, which makes a kind of sense. But if you haven't seen it, it's about how he became a self-made millionaire, isn't it? And it's very funny. I don't know, does it stand up now? Have you been back and watched it?
I've not watched it again since. But I remember, growing up, I mean, I'm older than you, but not by loads. It was formative in my comedy career. I never thought of doing comedy back then. I was just learning more about it by watching people do sitcoms like that. Good stuff, I thought.
Yeah, although I think remembering the great Dennis Waterman for On the Up, it's a bit like remembering Paul McCartney for the Frog Chorus.
I know.
Or Elton John for Hakuna Matata.
No. But someone's got to mention it, because everyone's just mentioning Mind one line, so someone's got to, shout out for On the Up.
Yeah, too right. And the late, great Joan Sims, by the way. What a legend.
Just the one, Mrs. Wembley?
Just the one.
The catchphrase that didn't even need to make sense.
No, of course they didn't. Just repeat it ad nauseam. Yeah, that would do it. Back to Little
Simpler
Britain.
time.
Yeah, too right. Let's go to Doctor Who now, Nick. Doctor Who? Who?
Yes, well, whilst we're speaking of old TV shows, so Doctor Who, Ncuti Gatwa is replacing Jodie Whittaker as new Doctor in 2023. Now, speaking of our age, I'm obviously too old because I don't know who either of those people are. Presumably they feel the same about me. I dropped out of the whole Doctor Who thing after Sylvester McCoy. Remember him? And I liked Peter Davison. My brother had the money box of the TARDIS with him on it. So that was my era. But as a kid, it was amazing to watch, wasn't it? It was sort of scary and mysterious, and the theme tune was amazing. I think we're supposed to be... This story, I think we're supposed to be either pleased or outraged, I suppose, because it's the first black Doctor Who. I sort of refuse to get into that level of culture war stuff, but I think that's why it's probably been included.
I mean, I think in terms of the culture wars, nothing to see here. This guy is a talented actor. He's great looking, and I think he'll be a fantastic Doctor Who.
I mean, I've not seen Sex Education, the TV show.
Yeah. I've watched it, actually, very slowly.
Really?
It's a good show.
I think I still know the basics. Well, I've got an 8-week-old kid, so I must have got it right at least once. But
I actually broke my phone rewinding it all the time. Didn't know you could do that with an iPhone.
The idea of anyone caring who plays Doctor Who, as if... Because you have to suspend so much disbelief. There is someone who can travel in a way that breaks Einstein's rules on space-time in this 5-dimensional box that manages to battle aliens and never really affects the timeline. At the end of it, you go, I'll take all that. But a woman? No, come on. If you're a Doctor Who fan, you can absolutely follow it wherever it goes.
Well, I mean, this is the point. It's absolutely a non-story that a talented young black actor is now Doctor Who, because for me, the point about Doctor Who, it's a time-travelling, eccentric man. That's the character. And therefore, this is going to be great, and he'll take it to a great place. I still have a problem with a female Doctor Who.
Really?
Just because...
They can be doctors now, you know.
Doctor Who... Well, I know, for me, but perhaps it's just prejudice, but it's like James Bond. It's a male character.
It's James Bond, not Jane Bond, Mark. That's what you're trying to say.
James Bond is a human. That's the difference. If you buy into this story...
Doctor Who's pretty human.
Not
long scarves and
slightly
love
human,
of puns.
Slightly human in the American film, almost a reboot before the actual Christopher Eccleston reboot. Not Gallifreyan. Come on.
Yeah. What do you think? Female Doctor Who? Was that? Did they take a wrong turn there?
Obviously, I'm against it. But you see, I'm not convinced about females in the workplace yet. So it's a whole other kettle of fish.
It's a good point.
Thank you.
I'm going to get in trouble with the brilliant female team that work on this show now. Let's move on to The Times and a cautionary tale about allergies, Steve.
Yeah, really sad. An inquest said that takeaway deliveries should have more information, more warnings about allergies. This is after a university graduate with a peanut allergy collapsed and died 71 minutes after taking 2 bites out of a chicken tikka masala pizza that he'd ordered on the Deliveroo app. And this is the point, that he'd made orders before from this place, but there's claims that there was a different recipe that now used peanut powder rather than almond powder. And we live in good times for having allergen information if you buy a thing. So if you go to a big shop and it's all written on the back, loads of allergies, and we often mock on stage about peanut butter, says may contain nuts and all that, yeah. But the point is, it's a good system.
Not do all my material, please.
Yeah, it's a good system. However, it's clear. I mean, if it's printable on a label, it's puttable on an app. So more can be done about it.
I agree. I think it's a tragic story.
So I have some personal experience because I went out with someone who had a very severe nut allergy, and they were very beautiful. They're a very beautiful person. You have to be stunning to get away with being that annoying, because it's so difficult to have a severe nut allergy. You have to ask every waiter and waitress, like, does this have nuts? And then they say, I'm not sure, I'll check with the kitchen. And they're all a bit vague about it. And people are like, well, it can kill me. So it's very difficult to have. And the labels, you look in the supermarket, you find there's about 2 things in the whole supermarket you can eat, because everything has nut traces or met nuts once, you know what I mean, is related to nuts. So I sympathise a lot, because it's a very...
You actually dated someone even more complicated and high maintenance than you.
Isn't that incredible? There had to be one person...
Did she know that you contain nuts? Did you have that conversation?
Are we allowed to say that at this point?
Family show, folks.
I know, I didn't raise that, but yes, it's amazing that there are occasionally more hypochondriacs out there than me. There's only one, and they've been discovered. But let's...
You realise your ex is now watching this show?
Well...
Just eating cashew nuts, going, damn you, Dixon.
It was a jape all along.
Well, I've eaten a lot of Snickers since, and they taste like freedom. But the point is, very serious. I do want to shout out, the nut allergy people, it is a very real thing. And people need to they make it clearer whether things have nuts in.
Got to.
Yes.
Too right. Very serious situation. Let's have information, let's have labels, and let's make sure that this tragedy doesn't happen again. Monday's Guardian next, and a story I know you love, Steve, an incredible swap.
This story, I know it shouldn't wind me up the most out of all the stories, but for some reason it does. The story of a painting by a Canadian folk artist, Maud Lewis, traded for a meal in a restaurant, could fetch 35,000 Canadian dollars. So, I mean, it's looking better than the sandwiches. It was the better option of the two. But this is Irene Damas and her husband Tony ran a small restaurant in Ontario in the 70s where they would trade with local craftspeople and artisans for their wares and arts. And already I'm thinking this is the kind of annoying place where I'd get attitude if I asked for the Wi-Fi password. This is...
You would. You try plugging your laptop in one of their plug points.
Exactly. Winding me right up. Irene said, mind you, it wasn't just an ordinary grilled cheese sandwich, it was a great sandwich with 5-year-old cheddar and beautiful bread. $35,000! Don't make out you've done some sort of an OK deal. You're absolutely minted. But if you think about it, she didn't even make the bread. She traded with local artisan bakers. It's a pyramid scheme.
Of course it is.
It winds me right up.
Oh, nicely done. She's basically a Bernard Madoff times 100, isn't she?
Yeah.
It is curious, isn't it? The sort of amazing artefacts that have passed through people's hands in history. Stuff in the attic that they thought had no value, and it might have been a Picasso. Yeah. I'm old enough to remember growing up in the 70s, there was a great fashion for tearing out Victorian fireplaces and putting in... What you'd do is you'd basically sort of have this awful Formica sort of wood in front of what was the fireplace, and then a ring heater. And that was all the rage in the 70s and 80s. And people didn't know what to do with these Victorian fireplaces, so they would go into a skip.
Yeah.
And now they fetch for thousands. So one man's meat is another man's poison, isn't it?
Well, it was grilled cheese.
Yeah, well, each to their own. As long as it's vegan-friendly, I'm happy. That's it for part 2 of the show. Lots more to come. We've got, of course, contributions from Steve N. Allen and Nick Dixon. We've got the gayest house on the block, industrious Zimbabwean street scientists, easy for you to say, and their latest shenanigans. And these two will be sweating over what the IT department really knows about their online activity. Lots to come. We've saved our best till last. See you shortly.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Mark Dolan, and welcome back to Headliners, a first look at tomorrow's papers, with my future throuple partners and potential baby daddies, Steve N. Allen and Nick Dixon. Now, on that note, one from Monday's Sun. And is this the gayest house you've ever seen, Nick?
Yes, my neighbours threatened to kill me if I painted my home rainbow colours, and that also happened to the person in this story. Because that's the headline. That was a little joke. Did you get it? It was quite sophisticated. Mark missed it. So this is someone who painted their whole house in rainbow colours, and his hair's rainbow colours as well. And the crazy thing is, he's not even gay. No, he totally is. So this is the story. His neighbour said, got wind of the fact he wanted to paint his house rainbow colours. They came and threatened him and tried to beat him up, which he then reported to the police, and they got done for unlawful assault. And then he's now painted the whole thing rainbow colours anyway, and that's essentially... I mean, that's most of the story. It's a beach house in Australia.
And I say good luck to him, don't you think?
It's got some pictures. Yeah, I mean, some people are obviously concerned about the resale value of their homes, but in the end, the rainbow colours have triumphed.
The colours weren't in the right order.
Ooh.
Roy G. Biv, I was looking at those. They weren't going in the right one.
Do you mean in the order of the rainbow?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the
Not that you're OCD or anything.
I love it. You noticed that immediately. It was pure Rain Man, wasn't it?
This is quite triggering for old Alan.
Yeah. Don't throw any toothpicks
Roy
on
of
the
York
floor.
gave battle in vain. Red, orange.
You would be round there beating him up, but not because of homophobia.
It's a very different
because of pure...
You can have them in reverse order because you get the second rainbows. You know, when it's bright enough, you get the second rainbow slightly further out from that extra weird effect in the little raindrops.
Yeah.
But come on. There's only one rule with rainbows.
Do you think that's enough to warrant threatening him and beating him up?
I mean, I didn't, so no.
No. Okay.
No, nothing warrants that. There was the woman who owned a posh house in Chelsea, and I think she struggled to get planning permission for something. So by way of protest, because I think all the neighbours said they didn't want this planning application to go in, so she just painted her house in really garish stripes, just to annoy them. Because she didn't even live, actually, in the house. She just owned it. She was like a landlord. She's like, oh, look, the neighbours have been beastly and said no to my plan, so I'll just paint some stripes and there's nothing they can do about it. And similarly, there was a builder, I think, on the south coast who had complaints about his house, and so he painted it, made it spotty. So it's a bit of a... seems to be a bit of a phenomenon.
I'm against neighbours. That's my stance.
Yeah.
You know, people who are near you. Yeah. I'm against that.
I think you should live in a compound. I think that would suit you well.
Thank you. Well, I grew up in the country, surrounded by nothing, just the animals, and I formed an understanding with them. And I get on much better with owls and wolves.
You are feral, aren't you?
Yes.
And you shed in the summer.
Yeah. So what?
And you nest, don't you?
Yeah, I'm a valid human too, with feelings.
You do your business in all sorts of funny places. You're quite, you're a proper little scamp. A human squirrel, if you like.
Thanks, mate.
Which is surprising that woman went out with you with a nut allergy.
I know, but I've got a very good personality.
We'll be the judge of that. Moving on, the weather is turning warm. You've made your pims, gathered your quiches, laid out a blanket. What could go wrong if you're Italian, Steve?
You can't have a picnic in Rome. Not with all the pigs going around, boars technically. So it's not just a joy police thing. The problem is they've got issues with wild boars over there. Now, part one was that people were being attacked. There's 23,000 wild boars living in or around Rome, lovely place. And there was a curfew put in because of these wild boar attacks. Add in the fact that they are worried about what they called incursions, which sounds more military planned than... I mean, it's not very wild, so maybe look at that. But this African swine fever has been detected in the dead animal, one of the dead ones. They're worried about it. People who go for walks now have to wash their shoes like we had to do in foot and mouth. But, and I know this is heartless of me, it seems like problem 2 solves problem 1. They're worried about there being so many wild boars attacking people. A disease has turned up that only kills wild boars and not humans. I mean, why should we care? But then again, when in Rome.
Yeah, let rip is what you're saying about the pigs, aren't you?
Yeah.
You missed his punny and he said, when in Rome, and that was good.
Thank you. It was worthy of repetition.
Thank you. I like to repeat Steve jokes and claim credit for them. Can I just say, Mike, I'm bored of this story. Bored. Like a wild boar. Thank you. Because we're going to get another... We had monkeys last night. We're going to get another animal-based flu story every day now, forever. Because we've had COVID, it might not be animals, but we're going to get constant... scary virus stories, mainly that come to nothing until the one that kills us all, obs. But, that probably won't be for a while.
Yeah, OK. Well, look, we'll resist any more pig-based puns as we get to our next story. And it's the Telegraph. Desperate times call for desperate yet admirably ingenious measures, Nick.
Yes, desperate Zimbabweans boiling nappies to get high in new drug craze. So drug users say sodium polyacrylate, is possibly the pronunciation, Steve will tell me later, the absorbent part of a nappy gets them high enough to carry on with their grim daily lives, which is such a sort of day-to-day phrase, their grim daily lives. I mean, it's a sort of horrific and sort of grimly amusing story at the same time. It says they scrape the nappies clean, then boil them, and a thickish white stuff emerges, as it so often does. And this is put into the bottom of jars and sold. And one bleak story here from Miriam, 23, saying that she took the nappy mixture to give her the courage to do sex work, which is the bleakest sentence yet on headliners. So this is obviously the country's got massive economic problems. People have no money. They've resorted to smoking nappies, and it's known as the juice of Pampers, is what it's colloquially known as. And it just gets worse from there, really. Someone says the nappy mixture gives me a lot of strength when I'm doing my job. This is a gardener who gets it who earns £4 a day and is... So anyway, it's people doing nappy drugs because they're broke.
So, firstly, they should, if it gets you high, they should have called it Pampas grass.
That would do the job.
But they scrape the nappies clean and then boil them. Why don't you use clean ones to begin with, fresh ones? Because if you want something that makes you feel better about your day, don't huff a dirty nappy. At least you'd feel like, at least I'm getting a clean one. I sniff a lot of nappies these days. Yes,
you are the father of one. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Little one, Steve Jr. is how old now?
8 weeks.
Brilliant stuff.
Yeah.
It's quite a strange juxtaposition, sort of people using nappies to get high and Steve's beautiful news
Well,
about
they
his
sniff the nappies. Because you have to work out whether they've been used or not.
Yes,
it's a little...
one thing leads to another. Now you're addicted to the juice of Pampers.
But I am sniffing it 10 times a day. So now I think about it, maybe I am.
Someone says here, it's a great life. Someone's written here, if they have this nappy stuff, they'll be plastered the whole day and will not even have to worry about food or women. What a life.
Yeah.
But it is at the same time...
We can but dream.
At the same time, it is a grimly serious... Like, this is the problem with this show. We're on the edge because it is also a grimly...
Do you know how this... Not to give viewers ideas, but do you know how this is imbibed? It goes into a jar. Do they eat it, smoke it?
That's what I couldn't find throughout the article.
Inject it? What happens?
But the fact that it's in the jar makes me wonder if they do eat it. I don't know, Steve. What do you do?
I just go raw, straight in, neat. Yeah. That's how I like it.
But do Huggies give you the munchies?
Well, I imagine, if anything, it'll cure that, because a sniff of his nappy, and I don't really feel like eating for a while. I also don't think that sodium polyacrylate could turn into any sort of psychoactive drug or anything. It's not a fancy chemical. It's just a couple of double oxygen bond, single oxygen bond with a negative on it. But that's all you got going on there. So that's not going to get you.
No, it says that clearly. You don't have to worry about food, Mark, or women. So no munchies, no woman, no cry.
Smoking nappies, don't try that one at home. Yet more science, this time it's in The Guardian, and it might be a bit more useful to humanity than sniffing nappies, Steve.
It is amazing. So it's a two-pronged approach to try and deal with cancer. There are viruses that attack tumours. And so they happen anyway, but we can then take them into labs and make them stronger. We can, what's that? Scientists messing with a virus. Oh, scientists shouldn't play God. Well, it is curing cancer, so maybe a little bit. Yeah. And the problem is the human body would recognise these viruses as being a pathogen, attack it. So they're useful for surface-level cancers, like a melanoma. But these scientists at the University of Sheffield have found a way of effectively coating them in magnets so that you can steer them to where you need to. You know, like when you put your magnet under the table and make your keys move, like it's a magic trick? Yeah. It's literally that, but a lot smaller. And instead of trying to make these nanoparticle magnets, these magnetic domain bipoles, what they do is there's a little bug that produces them. And obviously it's better because when nature manages to do it, it's just a great way of doing it. And they produce these ferromagnetic bits so they can tap into the Earth's magnetic field and navigate. But you take these small things, coat these viruses, and then steer them into the tumour to do their business in there. It's fascinating. I mean, hopefully this will cure cancer. It'll probably stop you going through the airport scanner for a while, but who cares?
Yes, a cure for cancer is the ultimate holy grail, isn't it?
I mean, because you need a virus that's specific to each type of tumour, this might not end up being the cure-all, but curing some is good enough. You know, in any individual life that gets prolonged by this technique, yeah.
Yeah, too right. A rare good news story in relation to viruses. Monday's Mail are reporting on a big night in boxing. Who better to educate us than the most masculine of pursuits and the most masculine of men, Nick Dixon.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, and this is way more important than curing cancer. This is Canelo versus Bivol. So if you missed this, Canelo is known as a pound-for-pound great in boxing. He's won at middleweight, super middleweight and light heavyweight. His only loss previously was to Floyd Mayweather, which was an even lighter weight of 153 pounds. But last night he got beaten by Dimitri Bivol, who managed to beat him on points, which is unheard of because Canelo's a big champion. He's fighting in Las Vegas. He's from Mexico. He has all his fans there. Everyone said he'd have to basically be knocked out you'd have to knock him out to get a draw, as the phrase goes. But actually, he was beaten narrowly on points, 115 to 113, which means Bivol beat him comfortably by way more than that. So that's very controversial because people are saying, hey, we need to change this because the judges are so dodgy. But he won so comprehensively, they still gave him it. They just gave him it by way less of a margin than they should. If he'd have won one more round, he'd have got a draw, which was absurd. So this is a bit of a letdown for Canelo because he's known as this great fighter. There was even talk of him fighting Usyk at one point, which is absurd because he's one of the best cruiserweights of all time, just smashed Anthony Joshua at heavyweight. So people started to think that Canelo can beat anyone at any weight class, and he beat Kovalev at light heavyweight. So people are like, this guy can just beat anyone, even though he's 5'8.5" and is more of a middleweight. But it turned out he did hit his limits here. But to be fair to Canelo, he was trying to achieve greatness. He doesn't just want to win easily, he wants to be one of the all-time greats. So there you go.
And is that going to happen, do you think?
It's already happened. People will definitely recognise him as one of the all-time greats. It's just that it's turned out he's not a total god and he can be beaten, and so now he's going to have to regroup.
What is the attraction of boxing? Because it's a massive sport, but some people tune out when boxing is discussed.
It's men punching each other in the face, but it's more, and now women. But it's more than that. It's the heroic aspect, Mark. Teddy Atlas always explains it well. The great trainer who trained Mike Tyson. It's that these guys are prepared to put their lives on the line, and it's a sort of primal thing. They go in there and they could actually die, and it's very high stakes. And that's a different kind of person that's prepared to do that. It's a warrior mentality that we don't encounter in everyday life.
I see. Oh, good stuff. Well, let's continue to fight our way through the remaining stories of the show. The Times now, and there's a more pure love than a bond between man and dog. Let's talk about this one, Steve.
Yeah, there's a new book coming out, Wonder Dog, How the Science of Dogs Changed the Science of Life. Early caveat, written by a dog owner and dog lover who says that dogs don't just stay with you because you are the source of food and because they have a pack mentality. They love you.
Cute.
They did some tests. So it's all based on these tests, and I think it was in Japan, where they get dog owners to make eye contact with the dog for a long while. Weirdly long. I mean, some of it is like, you two, get a kennel. But eventually, you test the blood levels and see how much oxytocin you've got, which is like the love hormone, the hug hormone is how it's also known. So they could have just hugged the dogs. It's probably that good that they didn't. And you compare and contrast that with people who are raising wolves, and not only was there no increase in oxytocin in the wolves don't like establishing eye contact, and probably at some point would just be like, I'll eat those eyes if they're on offer. But the dog and the human, both of us, have oxytocin after this. So we've evolved to fall in love with each other. I mean, I'm a cat owner. I've got 2 cats. And I think this is too harsh. You know, I look at especially one of the 2 cats, she's my favourite, and I do the slow blink that tells her that I love her.
Yes.
And she looks at me like she barely recognises me because maybe she caught a couple of episodes of MASH Report. Other than that, I'm just that waste around the house.
It's amazing. If you stare for half an hour into a dog's eyes in a slightly odd way, they'll get a 130% increase in oxytocin, and the human will get a 300% increase. So people really do love their dogs, but the wolves are much cooler. They're, like, not bothered. I see myself more as a sort of wolf figure, just kind of a cool loner. And it says don't you think dog love has got a bit carried away with it? There's a guy here with a dog called Oz, and it says, if Oz could speak, he could tell you when I last went to the toilet, at what point I went upstairs, and at what point I came back, and when I disappeared to take a call for a moment. I've had girlfriends like that. It's a bit much, isn't it, that level of neediness, don't you think? And
Did you get oxytocin when you hug them?
Yeah, I did, actually, and I miss it. But the thing is, I miss people, Steve, but have you noticed dog love has just increased in our lifetimes in general? People already like dogs, we got on with dogs, but some people kept them outside at night and things. Now that'd be seen as like a hate crime. Yeah. Like the dog love of dogs has become more and more.
We've infantilised dogs a bit, haven't we?
But I just wonder if based on this, because it says dogs are we've become sort of hardwired with them, if actually our relationship with dogs is getting chemically closer over time.
And also we've given them a diet now which is similar to ours, which is why they're obese and getting type 2 diabetes. We're not helping, are we? Not really. We say we love them, but, you know...
Wolves are better off.
Just a bit. The subject of this next one from The Times wakes me up in a sweaty panic sometimes. Nick, tell us more.
Yeah, this is about IT company. Your work IT department knowing way more about you than you think. And I did notice just before the show, Mark chucked his laptop out the window. And someone who works for a drinks company here who's remained anonymous says that he worked in a big drinks company, and he says, when I met the warehouse workers for the first time, I already knew exactly what porn they watched. So that should give you an idea of the level of knowledge that your employer has. Don't use work phones or laptops, people. It says that some of them have software that logs every keystroke that takes place on a work device, and they can hijack your microphone or webcam. So you've got to be very, very careful. Some of it's necessary for, trading floors that have regulations and stuff. But basically, keep a burner phone. Be like a drug dealer in The Wire.
But also, I mean, if you are worried that your workplace has a keystroke logger on there, if you're running Windows, you go into accessibility tools, open up the on-screen keyboard, and you can type in just using the mouse. I mean, not that I particularly expertise in getting away with it.
You can get a VPN as well.
A VPN,
like you've definitely got.
Browser.
Yeah.
You can run it from a flash drive. You don't even need to install it as an app.
When you go on, the world thinks you're in Jamaica or something, doesn't it? Yeah.
I'm getting to that age now where my bosses don't have to worry about me watching porn at work, OK? I'm just on eBay looking at a waffle iron. Yeah.
And that's still not work, Mark, so that should be punished as well.
Seems unfair to me. Shall we finish on aliens, Steve?
We can do, but this is a Daily Star alien story, so pretty much all of it is nonsense. Aliens could already be living with us. The word could is doing so much work in that sentence. Scientists have noted that our search for trying to track down life might be fruitless because they might be already here. Let's have a look at a bit of string theory. Why is gravity so weak? Well, maybe there are other dimensions than the 4 that we live in. Yeah. That's why gravity is a force whoops into there, and that's why it looks weak to us. And then someone says, what happens if these aliens live in those other dimensions?
Oh, gosh.
We'll never know.
Yeah, they're in this shadow biosphere, it says. And I just want to counter Steve by saying they are already here, definitely. Because when anyone does a DMT experience, and I don't approve of that kind of thing, but when people take these hallucinogenic drugs, which I almost said right, they see the clockwork elves. And these are kind of like alien beings that already live amongst us. Right. And then there are more benign beings you can access as well. So the aliens are already here, Steve. You just have to take enough drugs.
Well,
you have to sniff enough nappies.
Yeah.
I was going to say, well done, you beat me to it. Sniff enough nappies, Steve, and you will see the clockwork elves. That sounds like a good afternoon.
Well, it sounds like it to me. Thanks to the amazing Steve N. Allen and the equally amazing, the wonderful Nick Dixon. Thanks for your company. I'm back on Friday at 9. See you then.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here. Joe Biden walking out. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's